So this is Apple's newest flagship, the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and this is Samsung's flagship, the S23 Ultra. Now the S23 Ultra has been out for almost an entire year, but can it still hold its own against Apple's latest flagship? Now I will focus more on its cameras rather than, talk in length about the software and hardware on these two phones, just because it's hard to compare phones that aren't running the same OS. Now both phones are super fast phones, and I'll throw benchmark numbers later in the video and talk about my experience with these two phones. But in my opinion, what you want to use in terms of OS, whether it's iOS or Android, it's not up to me, but up to you and what you prefer. So just like in my reviews, I want to give you guys a basic spec overview of these two phones, and I just want to emphasize here that not because one has a higher number than the other doesn't mean it's ultimately better. Basically, it's how the hardware and software works together. So starting off with the S23 Ultra, in a nutshell, it features a 6.8-inch 120Hz AMOLED display that can dip down to 1 Hz to save on battery life, and the display has a peak brightness of 1750 nits, which is pretty bright. Now, this also packs a massive 5,000 mAh battery, which can fast charge the phone up to 45 watts wired or 15 watts wirelessly, and reverse wireless charging at 4.5 watts. Now, the S23 Ultra also packs a slightly overclocked Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and my unit comes with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, but you can get one with 12 gigs of RAM and up to 1 terabyte of storage. Oh, and this also features an S Pen, which does come in handy for days when I have to sign contracts and whatnot. The iPhone 15 Pro Max features a 6.7-inch 120Hz OLED display that can also dip down to 1 Hz to save on battery, thanks to ProMotion, and the display has a peak brightness of 2000 nits, which is a lot brighter on paper, but most days I couldn't really tell, especially outdoors. But inside the 15 Pro Max is a 42 mAh battery, and charging is capped to 25 watts wired and 15 watts wireless via MagSafe. Besides that though, the iPhone 15 Pro Max also features the super fast A17 Pro processor, which is Apple's latest chip this year, and it's a beast. Now my iPhone 15 Pro comes with 8 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage, but you can spec the 15 Pro Max up to 1 terabyte as well. In terms of overall design, I love this new titanium build that the iPhone's got. Not only does it make the phone way less than the previous iteration Pro iPhones, but the fact that they made the edges of the phone a bit more rounded on the back feels great in hand. Now, this isn't a knock on Samsung, but I will say that the new iPhone 15 Pro is a lot more comfortable than the S23 Ultra. The S23 Ultra feels fine and the in-hand feel is okay, but it does feel like it's a lot bigger than the 15 Pro Max. Now, if you're more of a case person, then all these details don't really matter to you all that much, and you know what, that's fair. Now, if you are looking for the best cases for the iPhone 15 Pro Max or the S23 Ultra, I just want to give a huge shout out to Dbrand for sponsoring a portion of this video and sending out their brand new Ghost case for the iPhone 15 Pro Max and their grip case for the S23 Ultra. Now, more often than not, I'm always using a case on my phone, especially when I'm traveling, and Dbrand's always got my back, especially with their brand new Ghost case. I think it's the best clear case that you can buy for the 15 Pro series or the S23 series. It's lightweight, it's grippy just like the grip case that I have for the S23 Ultra. It comes with really strong magnets for MagSafe and protects my phone really well. Now, Dbrand also made a promise that it'll never turn yellow, and if it ever does, they'll replace it for free, which is awesome. So if you guys want to get the best clear case on the market, one that looks good, especially with their skins too, go to dbrand.com/heymarkl or click the first link down below. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about software here just because, the whole iOS versus Android thing is a little bit weird and it'll just get too lengthy and too confusing to really give one recommendation over the other. But if you are open to using either one, then just keep watching this video. So the S23 Ultra is running Android 13, but with One UI 5.1 on top of it with all the recent updates, while the iPhone 15 Pro Max is running iOS 17.1. Now, like I said earlier, it might get too confusing on the software front because one is, running Android and the other is iOS. But if you want something that you can just, pick up and have a super simple home screen setup, the iPhone with iOS 17 is probably your choice of OS, but if you're the type of person that wants customization, you want a little bit of personality in there with multi-window and multitasking features, and let's say you want to be able to put your app icons anywhere and even use third-party icon packs, then Android or the S23 Ultra is the one that you should probably go with. Now, when it comes to performance, in terms of, day-to-day stuff, like for me, someone who's always, checking Instagram, posting on Reels, checking X, or, checking my emails or playing games here and there, I found that both phones do an incredible job with little to no stutters or lag. And after the recent update on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it actually doesn't overheat or get hot anymore when browsing Instagram. In all honesty, both phones are really good phones that just perform just about the same, at least, in terms of the apps that I use on a daily basis. But theoretically, the iPhone 15 Pro Max with the A17 Pro chip is going to be a lot faster or scores a lot higher in benchmarks. So if you care about that and you want the absolute best performance, then go with the iPhone. Now, when it comes to battery life, given that the S23 Ultra packs a bigger battery here, I thought, there would be a huge difference. But to my surprise, both are honestly comparable with, both phones able to average around 7 to 8 hours of screen on time. The S23 Ultra, at least my unit's always in Full HD Plus and in light mode. So if you don't have light mode enabled or Full HD Plus, you might be looking at around 6.5 to 7 hours. But still, these are pretty great battery life on a flagship phone. But I will say having a faster 45-watt charging really adds up, especially if you're always on the go and you don't really have much time to charge in between commutes or your meetings. That 45-watt charging versus, the 25 or 27-watt on the 15 Pro Max makes a pretty big difference. All right, now let's talk about the cameras. So the S23 Ultra packs a quad camera setup, a 200 megapixel main wide camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and two 10 megapixel telephoto cameras at 3x and a 10x periscope. Now, the iPhone 15 Pro Max features a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel 5x telephoto camera, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now, photo quality are obviously subjective. What I like in terms of photos and how it's processed might be something that you hate, or, vice versa. Maybe I like more moody looking shots while you prefer bright and very saturated photos. Now, personally, from my experience, the iPhone have always shot pretty neutral looking photos with not too much contrast, which does leave room for edits and, filters that you can add on to. But the S23 Ultra, on the other hand, is the other way around. It's a little bit sharper, more processed, and there's a noticeable difference in the contrast, and the colors are slightly more vibrant than the iPhone. But on the iPhone 15 Pro series, Apple really tweaked how the photos are processed, especially how it handles HDR scenarios, with the highlights not peaking as much and the shadows or processing isn't as harsh as previous iPhones. But the S23 Ultra have made improvements as well, especially in the photo department with slightly more accurate colors, better HDR processing, and personally, I think the S23 Ultra is a far more versatile camera phone, especially with the dual telephoto lens at 3x and 10x. Even though the sensors are smaller, the fact that there's a 3x option and a 10x optical zoom is much nicer than, doing some sort of digital zoom like what the iPhone's doing. And when it comes to videos, I think there's nothing that can beat the iPhone 15 Pro Max here. From the stabilization to the colors, the clarity, the processing, what Apple did here is truly magic. And with the addition of ProRes log and the ability to write media on an external SSD, takes mobile filmmaking to a whole nother level. Now, ProRes might take up a ton of storage space, but the natural look and the less processed video looks so much better than what Samsung's doing on the video front. Now, don't get me wrong, the S23 Ultra is still a great phone to shoot videos on, and maybe you don't care about shooting in log or to an SSD, but just like its photos, it is nice to have, those additional focal lengths to be more versatile when shooting videos. But if we're talking strictly quality and not necessarily the versatility of the lenses, the iPhone is still the king of videos on a smartphone. But yeah, that's the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Now, both phones are incredible phones, and whether you go with one or the other, I don't think that you'll be disappointed. But probably the biggest factor to consider here is pricing, especially with, trade-in deals. The S23 Ultra and the iPhone 15 Pro Max starts at $1199, and at that price, both will have 256 gigs of storage and 8 gigs of RAM. But if you do plan on upgrading, you may want to look into Samsung's trade-in deals. More often than not, Samsung will offer more for older phones than what Apple can offer on its website. Now, personally, I'll pick up the iPhone 15 Pro Max over the S23 Ultra, not because it's a much faster phone, but because I shoot a ton of videos, and if I can leave my bulky camera at home and just use my iPhone for everything as an entire package, the 15 Pro Max is better for me overall. I think having access to better video capabilities is, what really won me over from the S23 Ultra. But what about you guys? Which one would you rather pick up? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you guys want me to compare the S23 Ultra to the Pixel 8 Pro, let me know in the comments down below, and yeah, I'll see you all in the next one.